Tistou of the Green Thumbs by Maurice Druon. Chapter 10, in which Tistou is given a lesson on poverty by Mr. Turnbull. Something quite out of the ordinary has to happen for little boys to be given a holiday. A prison that bursts into flower naturally creates a good deal of astonishment. But grown-ups recover very quickly from astonishment, and it's not long before it seems quite natural to them that there should now be a shrubbery where once there was a grey stone wall. People become accustomed to anything, even to the most extraordinary things. As far as Mr. Father and Mrs. Mother were concerned, Tistou's education soon became their principal anxiety once more. "I think the time has now come to show him what poverty is," said Mr. Father. "After that he should be taught what illness means," said Mrs. Mother, "so that he may learn to take proper care of his health." "Mr. Turnbull gave him an admirable lesson on order," said Mr. Father. "I suggest he should give him a lesson on poverty, too." Thus it was that the next day, under the auspices of Mr. Turnbull, Tistou learned that poor people live in slums. Tistou had been told to put on his old blue cap. In order to explain to Tistou that the slums were on the edge of the town, Mr. Turnbull used his most trumpet-like voice. "These slums are a scourge," he declared. "What is a scourge?" asked Tistou. "A scourge is an evil which attacks a large number of people, a very serious evil." Mr. Turnbull needed to say no more. Tistou was already rubbing his thumbs. But what awaited him was a far worse sight than any prison. Narrow, muddy, evil-smelling streets wound between a hodgepodge of wooden hovels, which were so tumble-down and ruinous that it was a marvel they stood up at all. The doors had all been patched, either with cardboard or pieces of old packing cases. Lying next door to the town proper, the wealthy town built of stone where the streets were cleaned every morning, the slum was like another town altogether and did it no honor. Here there were no street lamps, no sidewalks, no shops, no municipal watering carts. A little grass would harden the mud and make these streets a great deal pleasanter, while plenty of morning glory mingled with clematis would do a great deal to hold these tumble-down hovels together, thought Tistou, who was considering touching all the hideous things he saw. The hovels were terribly overcrowded, and as a result their inhabitants looked very unhealthy. Living huddled together without light, they turned pale like the endive mustache grows in the cellar. "I'm sure I shouldn't be happy if I were treated like an endive." Tistou decided to grow geraniums along the window ledges so that the slum children might at least have a little color to look at. "But why do all these people live in these rabbit hutches?" he asked. "Because they haven't got proper houses, of course. What a stupid question," replied Mr. Turnbull. "But why haven't they got proper houses?" "Because they haven't got any work." "Why haven't they got any work?" "Because they've got no luck." "So then they haven't got anything at all?" "That's what real poverty is, Tistou." "At least they'll have a few flowers tomorrow," Tistou said to himself. He saw a man beating a woman and a child running away in tears. "Does poverty make people wicked?" asked Tistou. "Often," replied Mr. Turnbull, who proceeded to launch out in the most horrifying sort of sermon. As far as Tistou could make out, poverty was like a horrible black hen, with a hooked beak and angry eyes, whose wings stretched widespread across the world, while she hatched out the most repulsive brood of chicks. Mr. Turnbull knew them all by name. There was the thief chick, who stole and cracked safes; the drink chick, who always had a glass in his hand till he fell down in the gutter; the vice chick, who was always doing the most disgraceful things; the crime chick, who was a sort of murderer, armed with a revolver; and the revolution chick, who was clearly the worst of all. "'Tistou, you're not listening to me," said Mr. Turnbull. "And stop poking your thumbs into all that dirt. What do you mean by it? Put your gloves on at once." "I forgot to bring them," said Tistou. "Very well, then, let's go on with our lesson. What is it that is required to control poverty and its deplorable consequences? Let's think a little. Something beginning with O." "I know," said Tistou. "Oceans of money." "Certainly not," said Mr. Turnbull. "It's order that's required." Tistou was silent for a moment. He appeared unconvinced. And when he had gathered his thoughts, he said, "Are you quite sure that this order you talk about really exists, Mr. Turnbull?" "I don't think it does." Mr. Turnbull's ears turned so red that they no longer looked like ears at all, but tomatoes. "Because if order did exist," said Tistou in a firm voice, "there wouldn't be any poverty." The report Tistou got that day was far from good. Mr. Turnbull wrote in the notebook, "Inattentive and inclined to be argumentative. His generous feelings are uncurbed by a sense of realities." But the following day, you've already guessed it, the following day the Mirapoil newspapers announced a positive deluge of morning glories. Moustache's advice had been followed to the letter. Arches of sky blue veiled the ugliness of the hovels. Borders of geraniums lined the lawn-covered streets. This underprivileged district, which people avoided because it was so horrible to look at, had become the most beautiful in the whole town. Now they went to visit it as if it were a museum. Its inhabitants decided to make a profit out of it. They put up a turnstile at the entrance and made people pay to come in. And there was work, too. Gardeners were needed, and guides, sellers of picture postcards and photographs. It was wealth. In order to put this wealth to good use, it was decided to build among the trees a huge block containing 999 beautiful apartments, each with a modern electric kitchen, in which all the inhabitants of the hovels might henceforth live in comfort. And as a lot of people were needed to build it, the unemployed found work. At the first opportunity, Moustache congratulated Tistou. "Oh, so there you are. You've made a first-class job of the slums. But the district is a little lacking in scent. Next time, give a thought to jasmine. It's a quick climber, and it smells good." Tistou promised Moustache to do better next time.